my name is Brother K. I greet, in you, your grace and your presence. I come among you to express elements which, I hope for it, will be simple and obvious. We will speak about two concepts, which I named strategy and abandonment. All that to replace within a specific framework, which I would name what is played on Earth, in this moment. The strategies belong to a natural process of adaptation. This natural process of adaptation exists in all the sectors of the incarnated human life. It corresponds partly so that I named organization. But there, I will not address myself to the principle of social organization, but much more, with the strategies established inside the conscience of the human being. He allowing to adapt, beyond even organization, so that it is likely to live, so that it is likely to wait, in the life, and all the sectors of the incarnated life. These strategies will be always referred compared to a certain number of elements which are present in the conscience. That these elements belong to the experiment past, that they belong to a setting because in other words of a setting in assumption of a certain number of variables, that these strategies are related to a goal or an objective, all this rises, of course, of the consequences of your lived, and also of the consequences of what the life represents, and proclamation, on this earth, at present. Any life, any conscience, within the personality, could not imagine or foresee, inside oneself, not to build strategy in order to meet life plans, agreements, aims and this, in some sector that it is. The principle of the abandonment of self is all except a strategy. That could correspond so that could have pronounced Christ Father, that your will is done, and not mine. There to give up the strategies, to leave the strategies, it is, indeed, to rely to divine providence, the thanksgiving, and to let run the life without wanting to interfere. Of course, the personality always will consider that like a resignation, like a lack of intelligence, a lack of precaution. The personality will have, always, all the reasons to continue to build strategies, would be this only because the social laws and of the environment to the full extent, through, precisely, the organizations, will oblige you, some share, as long as the personality dominates, to build these famous strategies. That concerns, as well, which milked on dates, which milked with organizations of your calendar, but also, the whole of the beliefs, whatever they are. The strategy is thus an adaptation. This adaptation is carried out only within a given environment, known and perceived. What is worth these strategies when there is a process, which I would call a rupture of continuity, where balance, such as it was considered within a given system, could not be expressed never again, because the system which settles is all except a system. The strategies, even aiming at releasing anything within the person, result, ultimately, only of one obvious result of actions and reactions, visible or not, but which underlie any action and allow, even, its demonstration or its concretization. On the level of the strategy, there exists, in a formal way, a connection so that we call, in incarnation, time and its linear unfolding. There thus exist strategies which are adapted to the various executives interior like outsides, such as they can be perceived, bringing, to some extent, to facilitate the life of the person, whatever is the sector, or whatever are the functions. The strategy is, to some extent, on the other hand, diametrically, of the abandonment. Because the strategy always refers and included understood it to you with what is known to refer with a past, with the experiment of each one, to preempt a future such as it can be supposed, imagined, dreamed, or dreaded. The abandonment more largely, not was explained to you but, in any case, was shown in its mechanisms, having to lead to what is named the absolute. The fact of being led is not a passage, as you know it, but well a rupture, total, organizational systems, in oneself, and also, of course, the rupture of all the strategies. You cannot, indeed, being subjected to your own strategies, or the strategies of the world, and you to leave there. To leave these strategies is not to denounce the strategies that is yours, or those of any organizational system, but well, to see them for what they are. The Absolute does not know linear time, even if it is subjected there, through this body. The Absolute cannot work out any strategy. It can, of course, try to anticipate something, but this anticipation puts an end, in a temporary way, with the Absolute, and reinstalls the conscience in self or the personality. We thus will replace these strategies, and this abandonment, within the framework of what is played on earth, currently. In my last incarnation, I lengthily clarified that it was impossible to feel in harmony, in a deeply disharmonious world. Even if the old ones, like stars, succeeded, to some extent, us free ourselves from all the strategies, and all the organizations, for some among us what is played on earth is not more one individual process, but a collective process. You are not without being unaware of only all the data of the history, which were subjected to your education, with formatting, were deeply faded. Who still, today, can believe that the creation of the world could take place, some share, there are 4 or 5,000 years? Who, today, can believe that the life is limited to an human form or an animal form? There exist very many evidence, carefully hidden, carefully dissimulated, processes of radical transformation, which took place on different occasions on this earth. All is made, within this company, said consumption, so that never you do not have to ask you the question and the interrogation of your origin and your to become, independently of the strategies built between the birth and death. The remainder, except personal experience, is completely occulted to you, and is strictly unknown for you. Of course, certain spiritual strategies called initiations will enable you to see, include understand, and of living, that you lived, if required, other lives. But these strategies answer only the law of action and reaction. They give you the direction of a history, the screen of a history, the course of your history present, but access does not give you it all, in any manner, with what is beyond what you can perceive, of what you can feel, and of what you can try out. Thus, to consider that you are the result of a past of this life like other lives, to consider that you traverse a way which will bring you of a point to another, belong to the strategies. Those, at the same time, of what was named the control system of mental human through the archontic organization, until I would name the spiritual lesson, aiming at sealing the thirst for knowledge, but which never will not be able to you free. There is an impression of release, there is an impression of progression which answers the strategic objectives of evolution of a heart towards one more, one better, more light. All that being justified by the karma, and a concept of fall, some share, in the history of humanity, the history of the heart. Of course, you do not have any means of checking, by the experiment and by lived, this kind of assertion and assertion. You can only agree to subject to you, to some extent, with something which allures you and likes to you, or not, and which will enable you to justify, in an uninterrupted way and without end, your presence on this earth, within this limit called birth and death, even if you have accesses to other births and others died, by mechanisms memorials. For a long time, many mystics, and since less longer, us old, and stars and the archangels, we clarified and made live if such were your to become a certain number of vibrations, a certain number of transformations of the conscience. What is played on earth, today, has nothing any more to see with what is conceivable, or apprehendable. This world lived innumerable conflagrations, innumerable ends and innumerable restartings, All this evidence is registered in the ground of this ground, as well at privileged places, as on the level of certain astrophysical rules and rules geophysics. It exists thus, indeed, mechanism deep, producing in any life incarnated and divided or separated, which is a process which comes, to some extent, to erase the hard drive, to enable him to start again, according to same basis. The finality of the life is not death. Just as that is not, either, the birth. Just as the life cannot be locked up within a framework, whatever it is. Can the light be locked up? Can freedom remain freedom, as of the moment when it is cut down by one of its parts? It is impossible. We spoke to you, and in particular the former commander, here are of many years, signs in the sky, signs on the earth, and signs, especially, inside UNDR to see the interventions of Orionis, in the heading messages with reading. All these signs were held, for those which are awakening lies or released, inside this body and of your conscience. Those which live inside, in their conscience, and beyond the conscience the manifestations of the vibrational light, perceive a process of change clearly. This process of change, which must lead you caterpillar to the butterfly, your resurrection, must be, some share, in synchronicity, or in any case, in resonance, with what occurs on earth, because of absence of difference between interior and outside, for that which is awakening lie or released. What is played on earth is not nothing less than total disappearance of what is known to you, as tallies, like reference, lifestyle. You calling with something which is to you strictly in canoe. What is strictly in canoe, by definition, cannot be known because this unknown does not correspond to any strategy, any plan, any organization, because the light is, itself, the support of life and the intelligence of life. What is played on earth, in this moment, corresponds so that I will be able to name the maintenance, costs which costs, of the dream and the illusion through the satisfaction of the desires related to the body, through the organization even of the company where it is necessary, like to you it said, to earn its living, you are maintained, since strong a long time, in a dominated system, as I said, here is a year, by the image, attraction and the vision and its interventions of the July 6th and 7th 2011. Moving away you, of course, of the direction even of which you are, beyond the appearance of the life, in any personality, and of all the plays which you can play in the various sectors of your life. What is played on earth is the total disappearance of all these strategies, and all these illusory constructions, which that is in you as outside you. Of course, that represents, and like Love Jean had explained it to you, a considerable shock and to see the intervention of Sri Aurobindo of October 17, 2010, resulting in the rupture of a fallacious balance, having to lead so that we called freedom, the absolute, or the release. What is played, inside you, is played, of course, on the earth there is no difference. And in you, the same processes are played exactly. Not through an external authority which would aim at hiding you anything, but much more, like the interior authority of the personality, which makes that you cannot see what she does not want to see. In other words, the personality goes, permanently and in oneself, to a certain extent, also, you to move away from something which comes to put an end to balance obtained. All is made, in the strategies, so that do not exist perception, comprehension, and lived, of what represents this new phase. Who is not, once again, superposable at all with anything which was known to you, by your experiment, or knowledge of this ground. What is played, in you, it is, there too, the strategy or the abandonment. The fight and resistance, or the abandonment of your life, such as you observe it today without you to trouble, possibly, of what is played on earth, you see clearly, on your scene of theater, which is played in you, what is at the level of your resistances, which is at the level of your strategies. You point out that no strategy, and no adaptation, can provide a model validates with what is played, on earth and in you, in this moment. This strategy must thus leave the place to the abandonment. This abandonment is neither a resignation, nor a diversion of anything, but much more, one way of seeing, in a lucid way, which is played in you, as being death of transitory and illusory, replaced by eternity. There does not exist any solution of continuity, between the illusory one and the transitory one, and eternity. No illusory and no transitory can become eternal. That is this body, that is your thoughts, that is your life, even, in its acceptance and its lived, which belong to you and to clean. Of course, and as you know it, the abandonment can be carried out only by yourself until the moment when what is played on earth will realize, in your place, the abandonment. This abandonment is not the abandonment of your resurrection, but the mechanism of return to the integrity of the light, being subjected to attraction and the vision, or the axis attraction-vision returning to you with alpha and the omega, in other words moment when you live apart from linear time, any way, and any initiation, or a very supposed progression or evolution. The personality is thus built, and the world is thus built, to make you disavow permanently and until the extreme limit, especially in Occident, the concept of mortality. There is, indeed, on the level of the human being like the solar system, and in particular on the level of the earth, an introduction of a continuity illusory, registered through the memory, and registered through the reincarnation. As long as you are subjected to that, of course, you are not free. Because you are subjected to your own strategies, with your own behaviors, which will move away you from the most naked truth, in order not to find you confronted with what could be called the extinction of the personality, or the extinction of the world, in its totality. The solution will appear to you, in an increasingly obvious way. Either you maintain strategies, or you abandon as. That was known as differently. That will be either the fear, or the love. The fear implies strategy and organization. The love implies freedom, joy absolute, absence of organization, and absence of strategy. Fluidity of the unit, abandonment to the light. Or light resistance, and strength to fluidity. This is played as well in this illusory body as in the various sectors of your life, then for the whole of humanity, during the time that it crosses henceforth. Your capacity or not see, clearly, with precision, without subterfuges, without pretenses, which is held in you, as what is held on the level of the world, more and more will place you in face of that. Indeed, the fear results only from one need to protect, that of a need to anticipate, or to avoid, the suffering. The love results from the abandonment. The love cannot in no case to be a strategy, nor a control dictated by any favors, whatever it is between two people, or a person and a group, or between a group and a person. All that, you go there where, if I can say it, more and more frequently, more and more intensely, as the final disintegration of this world will appear to you obvious and obvious. You point out that, in this period, to become it of each country, and the particular assignment of the elements named cavaliers, on an area of the world, are not the same ones as in another area of the world. All that is hidden to you corresponds, actually, with what is called the process of total extinction, not of the life, but of this form of life. Of course, that which considers the life only as the space ranging between the birth and death, will call that death. That which hopes, and beyond the hope, lived it to oneself, will remain in self. Time to change, I would say, of environment if one can say. Those which are absolute do not have any doubt, through what they live, through this absolute, which the life is not what is lived here but that, Of course, to disavow this life would not strictly be used for nothing, since you are here, registered in rules, the rules of this body. You are registered in social rules. You are registered in your own strategies, sometimes coming to run up against the strategies of the group, or the world. The whole of these strategies only aim at avoiding, in a manner like another, the end of the transitory one. Of course, it is an illusion, since the transitory one will take always fine. What is held, and what is played on earth, in this moment, will place you, in an increasingly obvious way, more and more speaking, in face of so that you are, so that you project, so that you realize strategy or abandonment. One cannot go with the other, and the other cannot go with one. As for the fear and the love, it is exactly about the same thing. It is also about the same thing between you, as an individualized conscience, and a world, as a total conscience of a dream, or an illusion. To give up the strategies, it is, indeed, to rely to divine providence and the action of the light. Always, that which works out the strategies, in other words the mental one, or the control system of mental human, at the total level, always will make you believe, and be made adhere, with the fact that is not possible. That not being visible nor perceptible, cannot exist. There thus remains only one attraction. Thus the world goes, and thus goes the personality, subjected to control of its mental, or mental human, in its totality. To leave the strategies does not want to say to give up anything, it is simply to let be held what must be held, which must be organized, which must be done. But you are not what makes, which must be done. That corresponds so that BUDA calls the change of glance or point of view. It is what I called, in my last incarnation, to release itself, entirely, of known, to penetrate the gasoline of the things, and to penetrate eternity. You will realize, very quickly, that it can exist, on this world as in you, no solution of continuity between the limitation and the unlimited one. In the same way that there does not exist, in you, no solution of continuity between the presence and the absolute, there exists, for this world, no possibility of continuity of the one with the other, in other words of the strategy to the abandonment. The circumstances which are played on this earth, will lead this ground to live the destruction of all the strategies. Because what arrives, obviously, is to you strictly inconnu, as for its consequences. Beyond the immediate consequence that I named process of extinction, this process of extinction is resurrection, and it is freedom. But as long as you conceive it like an end, as long as you conceive it like a drama, you cannot extract from your own strategies. And what will give you to living the life, which will give you to living what is played on earth, will be exactly the same thing, which will be played in you the abandonment, or strategies. Facility, or resistances. It exists no moral obligation, social, or even induced by system of control of mental human, which prevents you or which would prevent you from see clearly, between this principle of illusion related to the strategies, and this principle of abandonment related to the light. That will appear to you, I would even say, in a way more and more shouting. This is not a call to judge you, or to condemn you, in any manner, but simply, to look you with more close, in what motivates you, in what makes you act, in what makes you react, or in what enables you to remain tranquil. There will not be another alternative, because any opposition to what comes, will be able to involve another thing only resistances and sufferings. Acceptance being able to occur after the shock, the refusal, and the negotiation will lead you, more and more easily, to live supreme peace, contrasting, in addition, with unfolding of what will be played on earth. What is played outside, is played inside, but the immediate purpose is not the same one for the individual as for the collective. Because that depends, for each individual, of what I would call its conscience, or its non-conscience, or its unconsciousness initially. The comprehension of the total mechanisms, whatever the will to hide it to you, in various manners, will be such as it will not be able to even escape the direction, deep, of what arrives. But of where you are located strategies or the abandonment, you will note a phase of non-total superposition, between what is held and is played on earth, and what is held and is played in you, with personal capacity. Of this shift dissonances will appear because no strategy, once again, whatever it is, will not be able, ultimately and in finality, to prevent this process. What you are brought to pose, and in particular during intervention Michaelic, and until its next formal intervention, is what even occurs in this moment. And Dr. Michael and Mary gave go on September 22, 2012, to see, for more details, the recall inserted at the end of the text. Much among you, moreover, perceives, in the channel Marian, a species of heat, quite different from the energy of Mary. It is indeed about Archangel Michael, or Principal Christ Michael, Logos Solar, or if you prefer, the double Christi. It is the same conscience, assigned to vibration in an appreciably different form, but which, ultimately, takes part of the same gasoline. This presence, like the presence of Mary, have as a finality to show you that there does not exist, compared to what comes, no strategy which can hold, because what comes you is strictly inconnu. Even if I named the process of extinction, this process of extinction is a bad term, simply meaning the end of transitory and the return to eternity. As that appears, will Awaria itself, in your conscience, as in what is played on earth, progressively, it will be given to you to observe in an increasingly alive way, if I can say the difference between the moments when you are in strategy, and moments when you are in abandonment. Because, obviously, the body signs, the signs even of your life, the signs even of your interactions, your relations, your communications, your communions, will be deeply different according to your capacity, at the moment given, you abandon or to work out strategies. The consequences and the implications will seem to you deeply different, would be this only on interior peace, that on your interior joy, or, on unfolding even what will do without, for you, on the level of the elements, inside you as outside you. Each thing and each one will be strictly, to some extent, at the good place and the good time, to live this extinction, this passage of the caterpillar to the butterfly. During an amount of time which, fortunately, will be limited more and more, plus the days advance, there will be thus several possible observations. Either there is an acceptance of the light, in an abandonment with the light, an abandonment of self, in divine providence, which will make you instantaneously rock, if one can say, beyond any rocker in the state to be beyond any being, named absolute. Maybe of the strategies will continue to be worked out, to some extent, without the knowledge of your agreement, through the mental activity or emotional, which, as you will be able to see it, sometimes with distance, lead you to erect scaffolding, work out, build scenarios, to imagine dates, to imagine mechanisms, which can be dismounted and demolished the next moment. Of course, the love gives the love. Of course, the fear maintains the fear. The abandonment places you, more and more, in this quietude and this peace, that nothing can approach when you are working out strategies. The moments when you are in self, or in the infinite presence, or absolute, and the moments when you go down again in the personality, will appear to you, in a case as in the other, in an increasingly obvious way. Being able, moreover, to increase the feeling of temporary faintness of manner, because of a projection of mental, making you say that you will never arrive there, that it is too difficult, and that it is an illusion. of course, you will see clearly, and more clearly, that these thoughts are not you. And if you continue to work out strategies, while distancing you of these thoughts, you will not be able to make them conceal in a permanent way. Only the abandonment allows it. And the abandonment, as you know it, cannot be an objective, and even less one search, or less something which must be desired. Because as of the moment when there are a search, a desire, or a wish, you put from the start a distance between what you are in truth, and what you believe being within the illusion. I draw your attention that at a given time, extremely near in linear term, that will appear to you in an increasingly convincing way. And that will be needed, at this moment, and that will be easy for you, if you already lived of the moments related to the experiment of self, you more distance, more and more, of what is emitted by your clean mental. That is not posed for that which is absolute, since the mental one cannot dictate, nor to impose anything, with that which is absolute with a form. What is not the case, of course, for that which is in self, that this one self is a temporary experiment, or who is spread out more and more in time and the intensity, until the infinite presence. What occurs, and what will occur, at a given time, is the shock of the humanity, which is the instantaneous comprehension of the process of extinction. Not, like a thought, not, as the consequence of what is seen, but, like one lived immanent much more. In the same way that an animal flees a fire before it arrives, or a boat which will run before this one does not run, in the same way, the human being will seize, in an extremely brutal way, which is played. It is at this time that your role of liberator will become most important. Not by any deliberate intention release anyone, but much more, not leave of catch to the strategies. But, therefore, to install you much more, in an increasingly intense way, in the absolute, or the infinite presence, in other words in the abandonment. Those among you who perceive, in the Marian channel or at the time of our arrival, and which are accustomed to this perception, sense already of many weeks, many months, or many years, clearly, the intensification of our presence, intensification of your presence, our common radiations, this alchemy called harmonium that cannot, if that occurred for you, leave you, to some extent, indifferent. Because, obviously, the whole of this preparation which was completed, now, did not aim, ultimately, that to allow you to give up all the strategies, to live the abandonment, and food it oneself, the infinite presence, or absolute. The conjunction of the revelation, with humanity, by the events of the sky and the earth, on the human conscience, directly, whatever would could be still undertaken by the operations of those which control the control system of mental human, will not be able to allow, in no case, to change gives it, nor to modify, by any strategy, the return of the light. Of course, as long as you are not absolute, as long as you did not test or you are not installed within the infinite presence, all that will remain only calculations, assumptions, and perhaps, strategies of avoidance, making you refuse to see what will be visible, in your eyes with all. Once past the first shock, and in a simple way, you will position yourself in a case of figure or another case of figure. Because the identification of the activity of your mental, like control system of mental human, will appear to you with such a clearness and such an obviousness, that no one could not be unaware of what is held, in the conscience as on earth. What is thus played, in this moment, and what will be played, more and more, on you, as out of ground, it is, obviously, your positioning, the course of your positioning, in the collective atmosphere of this process of extinction. You point out, in these moments, that you are neither your thoughts, nor your emotions, that you are simply a witness and an observer. Also recall you, simply, that if you release taken, if you abandon as, entirely, with what is held, you will not live, at all, the least interrogation, least fear, but you will settle, more and more easily, in the truth and peace. At this time, you will have transcended, within an individual capacity, your own illusion, while the illusion of the world dissolves. I thus invite you to look at you, not to judge you, not to make you feel guilty, but to observe well what is held, in you, as for your abandonment, your strategies. I do not speak, of course, of the usual organization of the life, which it must continue. But I speak well about your heart, your spirit, and not about the surface aspects of the life, which make it possible to maintain, to some extent, the illusion, in life. Will come one moment when the illusion of the life will be destroyed entirely. Will come one moment when there will be extinction of the caterpillar, and where the butterfly could only be expressed. I thus invite you to look at, clearly, without judgment and culpability, all that is held, in you, this moment, precisely, since the last interventions of Mary and Michael and Dr. on August 21 and 18, 2012, respectively, until the state which was given NDR September 22, 2012. During this period, also, to ask you the question of which is your goal? And to see, really, if your goal is transitory, registered voter in the transitory one, or if it concerns the absolute, which is not a goal, but attention towards this abandonment. See that more and more clearly, should not be a faintness, but much more, one opportunity, moreover, to accommodate what comes in you, as what comes on earth. One can say, to some extent, that the door of immortality, the door of eternity, is opened with double leaves, in you, as on earth. And that this opening will last the time which was allocated to you by Michael. And in the second time, by time that the earth itself allocates. You will not have any weight in it, if it is not the liberator aspect of the earth, and to be your own liberator. The blue coat of the grace and the wave of life are the elements which can seem to you surface of your lived vibratory, even if they are most intense, because not being held within the named centers of conscience-will chakras, but being held on spaces which are traditionally unknown greater number. The fact of feeling this wave life to go up, or to feel to settle, on its shoulders, the coat of the grace, at the same time as a hot presence on your left, is, of course, completely unusual, for the majority among you. But it is, precisely, of the reinforcement of this presence on your left, of the reinforcement of your sounds perceived in the ears, it is within these circumstances, that will be held the shock of humanity. This one is more than imminent, and I would even say that in certain places of the world, it already arrived. But it relates to sectors of the world, it does not relate to the world in its totality, for the moment. This moment will be locatable for you, in all, because the more it occurs shifted in time that it remains you, the more it will be close to the advertisement of Mary, at the collective level. There will be a species of synchronism, of superposition, of what must be held, in you, like outside, on the vibratory plan, as on the plan of the emotions and of mental, as on the plan of all that can be perceived. Your sight, at this time, will be, in its turn, conditioning, and will switch you, not on what there is to achieve as work because there is no work, in these circumstances, but what there is, simply, to implement for the establishment anything to make and to be held tranquil. Point out you, as the circumstances described as painful, from the point of view of the caterpillar, qualified sometimes drama, are only one slope of the same part. Other side, that is all, except a drama. Way in which you will react, in the way of which you will show your capacity to remain tranquil, will rise your adequacy, or not, with the return of the light entirely. Seize well, and look at well, which are your strategies. And clearly see in what these strategies are not, ultimately, that refusal unconscious of the Absolute. Without reconsidering the fear and the love, these elements will appear to you and I would say, at a given moment. This moment given will be locatable. You do not have to seek it, because it is registered in the sky, as in you. It is, to some extent, the first steps, the premise, of the extinction. Extinction, followed resurrection. Thus look at clearly in you, thus look at clearly the world, not in its details, but in what will be given, with a human collective, to see, hear, and with living. Your adjustment with this upheaval, where there is no continuity, will show where you are. Not to position you on a scale but, much more, to look at what can make distance with the abandonment. That represents, to some extent, not an ultimate chance, but an ultimate confrontation with yourself, as the world. Not in the direction of an opposition, but well in the direction of an adequacy, or an agreement or a refusal. To be informed, today, contrary to 10 years or 20 more years ago, of this process, should accept the moment of the shock, last involve, for the majority of human, no suffering. Because there will be such a seizure of the conscience, a condition, such a feeling of survival, that the heart will have of another possibility of only turning to immortality. But time between the fact of ceasing the process of extinction, and the moment when the heart turns to immortality, will be lived, obviously, in an extremely different way, by each brother and each sister. It is there that your role of liberator, settling in the infinite presence or the Absolute, will be dominating. Not like a will to be useful, not like, simply, a will of action, in the field of the matter, even if that is present, but much more, one state to be, beyond any will of action, resulting in an irradiation of the light, because of your transparency, and of your state which is held tranquil. The course of this access to ultimate will thus be done, you included understood it, over a time runs. And it will be all the more short as time advances. However, the intensity will be the same one. Simply, the duration of a supposed suffering will be, in fact, much less long. What the life proposes to you to live, in your life, henceforth, should not invite you to judge, but well to observe. And I will finish on these words: your state of abandonment, or then, your state to make, within the strategies. Once again, that occurs, not in the acts or the actions of the ordinary life, social, emotional, or professional, but really occurs in the intimacy from the heart. And will see it clearly to you. That could be, ultimately, neither a question, nor an interrogation, but much more, one direct answer of which you are. I do not open, because time past, of space of questionings. I transmit to you, simply, benefiting from this time of alignment, the blessings of the whole of the conclave of old and stars. I say to you within a few days, for another intervention. Brother K loves you. So long.